Good morning, and welcome to Shannie Loves Real Shyt. This is the discussion hour of Shannie Loves Real Shyt. We're talking about real topics, real things, real people, real emotions, the raw, pure, real shit. This time in our discussion hour today, we received here at Shannie Loves Real Shyt an article which was written by someone whom I personally do know but would like to remain anonymous. And this article is very raw and it's very real, which is good for us, but it is very raw and it is very deep and it can be a little bit traumatic depending on your personality. But it is something that millions, I will say, of human beings are dealing with, and it's something that is not discussed. It's something that you don't hear a lot about, but we are aware of. Now, a lot of the times with this specific topic, people like to make fun of other people and the whole labeling someone as an emo or as, goth or as a freak or nerd or whatever. The labels really mean nothing, but they do hurt. And just because someone does do something or feel a certain way, it doesn't make them a bad person or someone you should judge or have negative feelings towards, as we are all human beings and we all have emotions and we all act differently towards each emotion. So that being said, be ready, but this is something we should all be listening to. So please sit down and take this seriously. It is called Self-Injury Through the Eyes of a Cutter. I do suffer from a depressive disorder, but I am not suicidal. I was at one point, and still occasionally think that people would be better off if I died, but not by my own hand. Just in an accident or something like that. When I cut, it was different. I wasn't trying to kill myself when cutting. It wasn't a way of trying to end it. I was trying to get a handle on the situation and not kill myself. I wanted to stop my heart from breaking and hurting so much inside. I felt I couldn't put my feelings into words. I needed to find a way to cope. Self-injury was the way I found that worked best for me to cope, and not by killing myself. I first started cutting years ago. I can't remember how old I was exactly. I think I was about 13 years old. I was somewhere between being a kid and being an adult. That awkward stage, as I've heard so many people call it. It was, and sometimes still is, my way of coping when things feel out of control. I don't really know why I did it. Just that it was a release. What I was feeling started slipping away as soon as it started. As a teenager, that's the closest I could get to an explanation. But it's more than that. And it's so hard to explain why I do it. No one ever saw this explanation. It was in my diary. When people did ask about my cuts, most of the time I'd have some kind of explanation as to how those cuts got there. I wouldn't tell them that I did it on purpose. Other times, if someone asked me what happened, I'd either say, I don't know, or nothing, and pull up my sleeve down, or use my hand to cover it up. At one point, I did cut deep enough to warrant stitches. There were 19 stitches in all, 7 of one of the cuts and 6 for the other 2. I had been in a huge, intense argument with my boyfriend. He had said things that hurt and were meant to hurt me and didn't seem to care. My heart was breaking. At least I felt it was. It hurt so much. I was already suffering during a depressive episode on top of it all, so I felt like everything was spiraling out of control. I cut the inside of my leg so I could cover it up with my pants. I remember I did lose the mental pain by the 3rd cut. By that time, I was, numb to the emotional and mental pain that I felt because my body and mind were focusing on what I was doing to myself. I didn't even think about the blood except as the release of it, meaning the release of pain, I was feeling emotionally and mentally. I'd never cut that deep before, and I could feel the blade of the knife as it cut my skin. I could feel it as my skin split open with each slice. But I was glad I was feeling something that was real. Emotional and mental pain weren't real. They were tangible. I wouldn't have gone to the hospital. I was too ashamed, as often the case for many self-mutilators. A horrible phrase, but in truth, what we are. And worried that the doctor wouldn't believe whatever story I came up with. I was talking to a friend, and he could tell that something was not so much wrong, but off with me as we spoke. Next thing I knew, he was at my place within 10 minutes after we got off the phone. He said that the cuts were really deep and they would probably need stitches. He convinced me to get looked at and took me to the hospital. I went into the hospital by myself as I wouldn't let my friend come in with me. I was too embarrassed and worried he'd expose my lie that I told the doctor when asked what happened, for what it was. I told the doctor I had done it on some old barbed wire fencing out in a field in the bush I was walking in earlier that day. I didn't know if the doctor believed me because she gave me a funny look, but let it go at that. I know you probably think it was stupid to cut. You may even think that some of the reasons I would cut were stupid. That's your opinion and you're entitled to it. I can't really blame you for them. The purpose of me writing this is so you can understand why someone would self-harm, not to change your opinion. One thing you need to understand is that everyone deals with stress in their own way. Some use prayer, some use exercise, some use drugs and alcohol, and some self-harm, some clean. There are numerous ways people choose to cope. Obviously, some ways are better and healthier than others, but they are all done for the same purpose, to cope and deal with stress in life. My friend thought he understood what I had done. He said, in a way, I understand. I loved working/playing hurt. The more pain, the more I liked it. I worked all day with a broken hand or with frostbite or for whatever. For what? So I could say I could and tell myself I was in control of what I feel. Is that so different? Well, it is and it isn't. I don't like to do it. I don't like that I do it. I don't like the pain that I feel afterwards. I don't do it just so I can prove something to myself or anyone else. It is, in its own way, about control. Sometimes it's feeling like that's the only thing I can control when it feels like everything else in my life is just falling apart around me. I feel completely overwhelmed, and it doesn't always take a lot to overwhelm me, just like anyone else. At that point, from what I can see in that moment, there's little or nothing I can do about it. I have no control, so I cut. I have control over that. Over how much or how little I cut, and how much pain I will cause myself. It's like an addiction, too. You aren't actually in complete control of it. You just think and believe you are. You have to. It gets to be like smoking in a way. When you're depressed or feel like nothing's going right and you can't control anything, you cut. You feel that you are in control of that kind of pain. When the blood comes, you see it and feel it leaving your body, and it's a release. Like having a cigarette when you're ticked off, sad, or just plain emotional. It gets to the point where you feel you have to cut when something is wrong or getting upsetting. Just like you feel you have to smoke that cigarette. Sometimes, even when things are going well and things seem to be stable and under control, and the smallest thing went wrong, after the last time when I thought I had control, I realized later that I actually didn't have it at all. Have all that much control over it. Yes, I had control to decide whether or not to do it, but even that was only to a point. I was hurting too much mentally and emotionally to see that I have no control over how deep I cut, or to stop. Or so I cut deeper than I have ever before. I cut deeper than I have ever before. After it's all said and done, and I've calmed down and come out of the haze, so to speak, for lack of a better term, I see the cuts and I feel them. And I don't really feel the pain when I'm cutting. I just think, oh my God, why the heck did I do that? Then comes the unhappy knowledge that eventually it will happen again. It may not be as severe or painful as this time, but it will happen again. Unfortunately, most people addressing the cutting before they address the reasons for it. If the reasons even get addressed at all. A lot of times, finding out triggers of the feelings that lead to the cutting are often secondary and treated as insignificant compared to the cutting itself, when it should be the other way around. The cutting should be the secondary to the reasons. I've found, with myself and others I've met that cut, but it's a way of dealing with emotions, feelings, and situations. We feel that It's a way of dealing with emotions, feelings, and situations we feel that are beyond any type of control for us. Please remember that cutting isn't the only form of self-harm. There are different forms of self-mutilation as well, which also fall under self-harm. Some may burn themselves. Some may over-exercise, like an obsession to extent of injury, and do physical damage to their bodies that way. Those are just a couple examples. Eating disorders like bulimia and anorexia are another form of self-harm. Though they almost always start because the person involved wants and needs to have control over something. When they feel like they have no control over anything. You can't stop some of us from using one coping method without finding out what's causing them to cope with the things in such a way. If you get help for and deal with the triggers first, then you can learn/teach another coping strategy, a healthy one. Written by Anonymous. Well, like I said, this is an extremely deep topic, and it is something that we need to understand instead of judge. Self-mutilation is something that a lot of people do, and this person is exactly right. It's not just cutting yourself. It's so much more than that. We self-mutilate in so many ways. It's ridiculous. Even being our own worst critics, we're self-mutilating ourselves, putting ourselves down constantly, having to be in that darkness because we feel that darkness is the only thing we have. The phrase misery loves company, really comes to play here. This is something that even I don't self-cut, I'm not a self-mutilator that way, but I in the past completely can understand what this is about. You feel you need control of something, and all you can control is yourself, is what it comes down to. But all we know is negative, and when everything is negative, even what we feel is positive that we're doing to ourselves is in turn negative, and it becomes self-mutilation. I mean, take the thousands who are addicted to meth, the thousands and millions who are alcoholics, addicted to prescription pain pills, gamblers, sex addicts. There's so much out there. It's all self-mutilation. We all self-mutilate. And to disregard one form of self-mutilation because it sounds bizarre or seems extreme to us, why don't you just be an alcoholic instead of cut yourself? Well, as far as I'm concerned, those are the exact same thing. This person makes a completely good point and is dead on about it. It's not about what you're doing, it's about what you're doing to yourself, okay? If you understand, your actions, anybody can gamble, anybody can drink, anybody can cut, anybody can do this, but it's why you are doing it is what really needs to be addressed. I feel this is, it's something that's going on way too long. And I mean, think of the teenage suicide rate right now in Canada alone. Okay, I know there's people from all over the world watching this. I am in Canada. And in Canada right now, the teenage suicide rate is at its highest. The bullying here is getting ridiculous. And it all stems from us adults. We all have this attitude of, oh, well, we were bullied, or, oh, well, we were this. And we're all so judgmental. Doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter what sex. We are all extremely judgmental of one another. And this is where our problem lies. Makes people like this person feel like they need to hide inside themselves and self-mutilate. We all feel like we need to self-mutilate when we all don't. We really don't. I can't fix it. It bothers me. But we can talk about it. We can make everyone aware about it and discuss it and try and understand. And I know there is a lot of self-mutilators out there. Cutting, drinking, abusing drugs, abusing their bodies in sexual ways, just being depressed. Depression alone is a big form of self-mutilation. When you hate yourself, you are mutilating your soul. Do you understand that? Self-mutilation is a big deal. And this is why today, for Shannie Loves Real Shyt, this is our first topic that we're talking about today. Because it needs to be addressed. I'm going to be sharing this on our Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter. It's at Shannie Love RS. And follow us on our Facebook page as well. Facebook.com/Shannie Loves Real Shyt. And discuss this with us. You don't need to put your name out. Again, if you'd like to write something as well to talk about your own personal form of self-mutilation, or maybe someone you know who is self-mutilating, and again, it doesn't have to be cutting. It can be any form of self-mutilation. Please send it in and we'll read it here on Shannie Loves Real Shyt. And let's get this out there. Let's get more people talking about it. Everybody suffers from some sort of issues, let's say, and call them. And we all need to address them because they're significant. Each and every human being, your emotions are significant. No matter what they are, they mean something. Because the other person next to you may not have the same feelings you do, it does not mean that your feelings mean any less. Okay? So, please, send us in feedback. Follow us on Twitter. Talk to us on Twitter. Talk to us on Facebook. Write us a letter. Send us an email. Send us an inbox message. Anything you'd like to do. And please, join us again next time on Shannie Loves Real Shyt.